Out of storage and off the boat that's taken Tim Nicholson and Joanne Bowlt's car across the 9th and final stretch of water from Sydney to Auckland, New Zealand. But first, a media opportunity with TVNZ before they begin the last leg of an adventure that began in Oxford, UK in May last year. Over the last 9 months, their 1954 Morris Oxford has needed little repair work. For a car that's just passed its 50th anniversary year, she's done remarkably well.
We've just arrived in New Zealand and we're trying to sort out the problem we've got with our gearbox in that we've lost first gear, and we're draining the oil in order that we can get out the piece of metal, the tooth that's probably come off the gearbox, so that we don't do any more damage.
Fixed and time to show off at one of New Zealand's largest car rallies in northwest Auckland.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to draw your attention to two very special visitors at the show today. Tim and Joanne are volunteers with the Red Cross, and they've driven their 50-year-old Morris Oxford from Oxford in England all the way out to New Zealand, headed for Oxford in Canterbury.
As Red Cross volunteers, they visited the charity throughout the trip. Thanks to donations along the way, they're well on the way to raising their target of £10,000.
We arrived in New Zealand just over a week ago. We spent most of last week getting organised, meeting with the Red Cross, doing various media interviews and photos, getting the car through customs, quarantine, inspections. It's been pretty busy, but we're now ready to hit the road for the final leg of our journey through New Zealand down to Oxford in County Canterbury. We're pretty tired, but we're really looking forward to getting there.
With 10 countries behind them, Tim and Joanne are finally on the home straight. After driving thousands of miles, they've just a few hundred left to go to the furthest Oxford in the world from Oxford, England. Alistair Fee, BBC South Today. Saying goodbye to the furthest Oxford from Oxford in the UK. After thousands of people and hundreds of classic cars gathered to welcome their arrival, the time has come to get back on the road.
We're just leaving Oxford, New Zealand, to begin our tour around the South Island and then our journey home, which feels very strange, having been driving for about 9 months to get to Oxford in New Zealand. And we're actually starting to think about home for the first time.
To get to New Zealand, Tim and Joanne drove their 51-year-old Morris Oxford across Europe, North Africa, India and Australia. But before they make their way back, there's still plenty of time to have a look around.
We're visiting a farm in New Zealand for a few days. They've got wheat and sheep. These sheep have just been shorn and they're now being fattened up. And in a few days' time, when they're fat enough, they'll be carted off to England to be sold in Waitrose.
Just want you to state your name into the machine, just doing some breath testing.
Okay, Timothy Nicholson.
You haven't been drinking at all?
No.
No, you've passed.
Lovely.
And where are you travelling from?
From Oxford in England.
Oxford in England to Oxford in New Zealand.
That's
and
right.
Back again.
Indeed,
Oh,
yeah.
very good.
They may be safe to drive, but how's the car holding up?
We've just arrived in Dunedin, and coming down one of the steep hills, we're getting a bit of a rattle that we're not used to. I thought it might have been the drive shaft where it connects to the gearbox, which has been off recently when we swapped the gearbox, but that seems to be okay, so I'm not quite sure what it is.
Time to give Florence a break and a ride on New Zealand's longest private railway, but it's also a chance to do a spot of fundraising.
We have driven our 50-year-old Morris Oxford from Oxford in England to Oxford in North Canterbury.
In aid of the Red Cross, along the way they hope to raise £10,000.
Thank you very much.
We're just on our way up to Nicholson, the top of the South Island in New Zealand. And unfortunately, a truck went herring past and threw up a stone and smashed the windscreen. So we've just pulled over and we'll now have to take stock and think what we do here, whether we can keep going without the windscreen.
Losing the original 1954 windscreen may be the biggest setback they've had to date, but after all Tim and Joanne have coped with in the last year, something tells me Florence will be back on top form soon. Alistair Fee, BBC South Today. A new windscreen for an old car. After 51 years and thousands of miles, Tim and Joanne's Morris Oxford had its original glass smashed by a stone just after they began their long journey home. But as with every obstacle they've encountered on the way, it's all part of the adventure.
We're
back on the road again and the windscreen's sorted.
Ahead of schedule, there's still time to enjoy the country around them, starting with a spot of kayaking. Having left Oxford, New Zealand, the real journey doesn't start till they ship back to Australia.
We've swapped our kayaks for backpacks and we're now walking around the rest of the track, around the Abel Tasman National Park. You can only cross this bit 2 hours either side of low tide, and even then you have to wade across the estuary, but it's quite refreshing.
You can't blame them for taking a bit of time out. It took 9 months and 9 sea crossings for them to reach Oxford in New Zealand. Always keen for publicity, there's still time to appear on TVNZ. Tim and Joanne are raising money for the Red Cross, and the media attention along the way has really helped.
Well, welcome you two.
Thank you very much.
Need a little stretch after your long journey?
Oh, I hope you're doing all right.
It's only really once we arrived in Oxford that we've started to think about going home. And it feels very strange, really. We're not quite sure what we'll do when we get home. We're not quite sure what reception we'll have. And although we know that we'll do some more fundraising for the Red Cross, we're not quite sure what we'll do thereafter and how we're going to live. So it will be an interesting few months, and we're quite looking forward certainly to seeing family and friends, so it will be good to get home.
Hello, I've got a problem with my engine. It started making a funny knocking noise.
Up until now, Tim and Joanne have been lucky. Among other countries, this Morris Oxford has got them across North Africa and India. Nicknamed Florence, the car's been bump-started a few times, but this is the first time they've been towed away.
It looks like it's something internal. They can't be sure because without stripping the engine down they don't really know, but it's now seen that whatever the noise is intermittent because it stopped making the noise, and maybe we head south and start our journey back to Auckland.
And then stop if we make a noise again.
Ever the optimists, the next stop is Australia, from where they'll drive to Adelaide, get a ship to Italy and return via Switzerland and France. Alistair Fee, BBC South Today.